the man had always lived a quiet life. His small cabin stood at the edge of a forest, far from the busy streets of town. The walls were simple, made of wood that had darkened over the years, and the windows gave a view of the tall trees swaying gently in the evening wind. Life had been predictable for him. Wake up, tend to the small garden behind the house, chop firewood, cook his meals, and then spend the evening reading by the fire. Most nights he enjoyed the peace, the silence broken only by the calls of birds settling in for the night, or the occasional rustle of a small animal in the undergrowth. That evening was no different. He had spent the day fixing a broken fence near the cabin, making sure the garden was safe from wandering deer, and collecting enough firewood for the night. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft glow behind the trees. When he settled into his chair by the fireplace with a cup of warm tea, the flames danced gently, casting long shadows across the room. He was about to turn the page of his book when a sharp knock on the door startled him. It was not unusual to hear sounds outside the wind, a bird or the occasional visitor, but this knock was different. It was urgent, almost desperate. He set his cup down carefully, feeling a mix of curiosity and concern. He walked to the door and peered through the small window, expecting perhaps a lost traveler or a neighbor, though at this hour it was unlikely. When he opened the door, he froze for a moment. Standing there was a woman, an Apache, her figure small and fragile against the darkness of the night. She was wearing only a torn piece of cloth that barely covered her, and her body shivered slightly from the cold evening air. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and exhaustion, yet there was a quiet strength in them too. She looked as if she had been running for hours, perhaps days, and had nowhere else to go. The man felt a sudden rush of concern and responsibility. He had faced many situations in his life, but none like this. For a moment, he thought about his safety, about the isolation of his cabin. But then he looked at her eyes, tired, frightened, desperate, and all his hesitation vanished. She needed help, and he could not turn her away. "Come in," he said softly, stepping aside to let her enter. The woman moved quickly inside, wrapping herself around the blanket he handed her. She seemed to shrink into it, as if trying to make herself smaller, less noticeable, less of a burden. The man noticed her hands were scraped, and her feet were dirty, showing that she had walked a long distance. He guided her to a chair near the fireplace and started a small fire in the hearth to warm the room further. "You're safe here. You don't have to be afraid." For a few moments, she did not speak. She simply sat there, shivering slightly, her eyes darting around the cabin as if taking in every detail. The man understood. She had probably learned, from past experiences, that strangers could be dangerous. Yet here she was, trusting him enough to step inside. He moved around the cabin, fetching a cup of warm tea and some dry clothes he had kept for emergencies. He handed her the tea first. The warmth in her hands seemed to calm her slightly, and she took a small sip, her eyes never leaving his. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was soft, trembling, but full of gratitude. "You're welcome," he replied. "You need to rest. I'll get you something to eat soon." She nodded, though it was clear she was too exhausted even to speak. The man looked at her for a moment, noticing the dirt on her skin and the small cuts on her hands and feet. He remembered the many stories he had heard of people traveling through the wilderness, of danger, hunger, and fear. And now, here was a woman who had faced all of that. Arriving at his door with nothing but a torn cloth to cover herself, he prepared a small meal of bread, some dried meat, and warm soup, placing it on a tray and bringing it to her. She took a few bites slowly, her eyes showing relief and appreciation. The man watched silently, realizing that sometimes words were not necessary. Acts of kindness, simple gestures, and a safe place to rest could mean more than anything else. As the night grew darker, the wind outside howled through the trees, rattling the windows. The man added more wood to the fire, casting a comforting glow across the room. The woman sat quietly, her body relaxing slightly under the warmth. Slowly, she began to tell him small details about herself, not yet her full story, but fragments, her name, where she had come from, and hints of the danger she had escaped. He listened carefully, not interrupting, offering only reassurance. In those quiet hours, the man realized something important. Life had a way of putting people in unexpected situations. One moment, you could be living a normal, peaceful life. The next, someone in need could appear at your door, seeking help. And in those moments, courage was not about fighting or defending yourself. It was about opening your heart and offering kindness when it was needed most. Time passed slowly. The woman, now sitting wrapped in a blanket, seemed to gain a little strength from the warmth and safety of the cabin. The man fetched another blanket, placing it over her shoulders, and suggested she try to sleep. She nodded, grateful but hesitant, as if still unsure whether she could truly trust that she was safe. "You can sleep now," he said gently. "I'll be right here. No one will hurt you." Her eyes softened, and for the first time that night, a small, genuine smile appeared on her face. It was fleeting, but it showed that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found. As she finally closed her eyes and began to drift into sleep, the man looked around his small cabin. It was just a simple home, but tonight it had become a sanctuary. He realized that the actions we take in small moments can have profound effects on others' lives. He had not expected anything extraordinary to happen that night, but life had shown him that heroism could be quiet and gentle, found in offering warmth, safety, and compassion. Hours passed, and the cabin grew silent except for the crackle of the fire. The man stayed awake for a while, keeping watch over the woman, ensuring that she rested peacefully. Outside, the wind continued to whisper through the trees, carrying with it the quiet sounds of the night. Inside, there was warmth, safety, and a sense of calm that came from knowing that he had done the right thing. By the time the first hints of dawn appeared, the woman was sleeping soundly, and the man finally allowed himself to relax. He knew that the night had been long for both of them, but it had also been a night that would not be forgotten. In a world where people often overlook the suffering of others, he had chosen to act with kindness. And that choice had made a real difference. And as the first light of morning touched the edge of the forest, the man understood that sometimes the most important moments in life are the ones we cannot plan for, the moments when someone appears at your door in need, when you decide to open your heart and help. Morning arrived slowly, the soft light of dawn filtering through the thin curtains of the cabin. The man stirred awake, stretching his arms as he glanced around the room. The woman was still asleep in the chair, wrapped in the blankets he had given her the night before. Her breathing was steady now, and for the first time since she had arrived, she looked peaceful. He quietly moved to the kitchen, careful not to wake her, and began preparing a small breakfast, some warm porridge, bread and a little fresh fruit he had picked from his garden the previous day. When he returned with the tray, she had opened her eyes, blinking slowly as the light touched her face. She gave a small, shy smile, and he could see gratitude shining in her eyes. "Good morning," he said softly. "You rested well?" She nodded, her voice still quiet. "Yes, thank you." He placed the tray on the small table in front of her. "Eat something. It will give you strength." She picked up a spoon and began to eat slowly. He watched her carefully, noticing the way she hesitated with each bite, as if she had not eaten a proper meal in a long time. He felt a pang of sadness, thinking of the hardships she must have faced to arrive at his door in such a state. But he reminded himself that now she was safe, and that was what mattered most. Once she had eaten, she finally seemed ready to speak more about her story. She took a deep breath, and in a voice that was soft but steady, she began to explain where she had come from. I was traveling," she said. "I was trying to get away from a bad situation. I had no place to go, and I was alone." She paused, her hands clutching the blanket around her shoulders. "I didn't know if anyone would help me. I didn't know if I would make it through the night." The man nodded, encouraging her to continue. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe now. You can tell me." She looked at him, her eyes full of relief and a hint of disbelief. I thought no one would care," she whispered. "I thought everyone would just ignore me or turn me away." He shook his head gently. "Some people might, but not everyone. Not everyone. I can help you. That's what matters now." For a long time, she stayed quiet, taking small sips of water and thinking about how to explain everything. Finally, She began to tell him about her journey. She spoke of the dangers she had faced traveling alone, the long nights without food or warmth, and the constant fear of being caught or harmed. She described how she had crossed forests and rivers, how she had slept under trees with nothing but the cold sky above her, and how she had struggled to find even a small source of food. The man listened carefully, his heart aching at each detail. He could not imagine facing such challenges alone. Yet here she was, sitting in his cabin, sharing her story with him, as though she had known him for years. He admired her strength, even though she was frightened and vulnerable. She had survived so much already. She had managed to keep going despite the hardships. "You were very brave," he said finally, when she paused. "It takes courage to keep moving when everything seems against you." She looked down, a small blush on her cheeks. "I didn't feel brave," she admitted. I just kept going because I had to. I had no choice." He nodded, understanding completely. Sometimes courage was not about feeling strong. It was about continuing to move forward when there seemed to be no way. And she had done exactly that. As the morning passed, he prepared a small area for her to rest again, setting up a chair with extra blankets and a pillow. The warmth of the cabin, combined with the steady presence of someone who cared, seemed to give her confidence. She finally relaxed enough to lean back, letting herself feel safe for the first time in days. While she rested, the man began to think about the next steps. He knew she could not stay in the cabin forever. She needed a place to rebuild her life, to recover from the trauma she had faced, and to find people she could trust. But he also knew that for now, the most important thing was to provide comfort, understanding, and a sense of stability. He sat quietly across from her, watching as she closed her eyes, her breathing becoming even and calm.
Ow.
Fragile life could be, how easily someone could be thrown into danger through no fault of their own. And yet, he also thought about how powerful small acts of kindness could be. Offering food, shelter, and simply listening to someone's story could change a person's life. Eventually, the woman began to speak again, sharing more details about her heritage and her family. She explained that she was Apache, and though she had grown up with a strong sense of community, she had been forced to leave because of circumstances beyond her control. She spoke of traditions, stories passed down through generations, and the sense of belonging that had been missing in her recent life. The man listened with genuine interest, asking gentle questions and learning about her culture. He realized that he was not only helping her in a moment of crisis, but he was also gaining insight into a world he had not known.
Oh.
She had survived. Not only the dangers of her journey, but also the loneliness of being disconnected from her roots. For hours, they spoke quietly, sharing stories, asking questions, and sometimes just sitting in silence. It was a calm, reflective time, and the man noticed that she began to smile more often, her eyes losing some of the fear that had first appeared at his door. She seemed to understand that in this small cabin, far from the dangers she had faced, she could feel human again, seen, respected, and safe. By mid-afternoon, she was able to stand and move around the cabin a little. He showed her where she could wash up and offered her some clean clothes. She hesitated at first, feeling shy and uncertain, but finally accepted. When she returned, she looked more like herself, refreshed and steadier on her feet. The man prepared another small meal, and as they ate together, they laughed quietly at small stories from their lives. For the first time since she had arrived, the woman seemed to relax completely, feeling a sense of normalcy she had not felt in days. The simple act of sharing food, warmth, and conversation had begun to heal the exhaustion and fear that had weighed so heavily on her. As evening approached again, the man reflected on the day. He had witnessed the slow transformation of a frightened, vulnerable woman into someone who could trust again, even if only a little. He realized that helping someone in need was not just about shelter or food. It was about listening, understanding, and giving them space to regain their sense of self. The woman, now calmer and more confident, looked around the cabin and smiled. "Thank you," she said softly. I don't know what I would have done without you." He shook his head gently. "You are strong. You've survived everything that came your way. I only helped you find a safe place to rest. The rest, the courage, the strength that has always been inside you." For a long time they sat quietly, the sun setting behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Outside, the forest seemed peaceful, and the sounds of nature reminded them both of the world continuing beyond the walls of the cabin. Inside, there was safety, warmth, the beginning of trust. The man knew that tomorrow would bring more challenges for the woman. She had a long road ahead to rebuild her life, to find safety and stability. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, she could sleep without fear. She could rest, and she could begin to believe that people were capable of kindness, even in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. And as the evening grew dark again, the man placed another blanket over her, made sure the fire burned steadily, and watched over her as she drifted off to sleep. He knew that this night, like the last, would be one of quiet reflection, of understanding, and of compassion. It would not solve all her problems, but it was a start, a small, meaningful beginning to a new chapter in her life. The following morning arrived quietly, with soft rays of sunlight slipping through the wooden blinds of the cabin. The man woke to the sound of birds calling in the forest outside, and the faint rustling of leaves in the gentle wind. He stretched and rubbed his eyes, thinking about the previous day. So much had happened in such a short time. A woman had appeared at his door, scared and alone, and by offering a simple act of kindness, he had been able to provide her with safety, warmth, and food. The memory of her eyes, so filled with fear, yet resilient, remained with him. He moved quietly, careful not to disturb her. She was still asleep, wrapped in the blankets on the chair near the fireplace, her chest rising and falling steadily. Seeing her there, peaceful and resting after so much hardship, gave him a quiet sense of satisfaction. It reminded him why helping others, even strangers, mattered. Sometimes life could be unpredictable, and sometimes someone could walk into your life needing help. It was in those moments that the best parts of humanity could shine. The woman awoke slowly, blinking at the soft sunlight, and then at the man who was quietly preparing breakfast. "Good morning," he said softly, smiling. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded, giving him a small smile. "Yes," she whispered, her voice still soft but steadier than yesterday. "I feel rested." He brought over a tray with porridge, bread, and some fruit. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, and he noticed that she was no longer hesitant or afraid to accept his help. There was a sense of trust developing between them, a fragile but growing bond that had begun to form the moment he had opened his door the night before. Once she had eaten, she sat quietly for a moment, looking into the fire. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said, her voice low. I've never met anyone who would just let me in like this." The man shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. I don't know your story, but I know that right now you need safety. That is all that matters." For a while, there was silence. Then she spoke again, this time sharing more details about her journey. She told him about the days she had spent alone in the wilderness, moving quietly to avoid danger, searching for food and trying to stay warm. She had faced hunger, fear, and exhaustion, yet she had not given up. Each step she took, even when her body screamed to stop, had been a decision to survive. The man listened intently, fascinated by her courage. "It is amazing," he said gently. "You survived everything. Many people might have given up, but you kept going." She looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise. I didn't feel brave," she admitted. "I just had to keep moving. I couldn't stop. I didn't have a choice." The man nodded, understanding completely. Sometimes, courage was not about feeling strong, it was about continuing, even when you were afraid. She had displayed that courage, and now she was here, sharing her story with him. That was an act of bravery, too, as the morning passed. He suggested she take a walk outside, just to feel the fresh air and sunlight. The woman hesitated, unsure if she could trust herself or the world outside. But eventually she agreed, stepping lightly into the cool morning air. The forest around the cabin was quiet and peaceful, with birds flitting from tree to tree and the faint sound of a nearby stream flowing over rocks. Walking slowly, she began to relax, noticing the beauty around her. The sunlight fell in golden beams through the leaves, and she felt a small sense of calm she had not felt in a long time. The man stayed close, walking beside her, offering gentle encouragement. "The world is not all danger," he said softly. "There are safe places, and there are kind people too." She smiled faintly, appreciating his words. I've forgotten that," she admitted. "I thought everyone was against me. I forgot that there could be kindness in the world." They walked together for a while, talking quietly about simple things, trees, birds, and the small joys of life. She spoke of her heritage, of the stories her family had told her as a child, and of the lessons she had learned from her community. The man listened with genuine interest, asking gentle questions and learning about a culture he had never known intimately. As they returned to the cabin, she seemed lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The simple act of walking in the sunlight, of speaking with someone who listened and cared, had given her a sense of hope. She was beginning to see that there were people in the world who would help without expecting anything in return. Back inside, the man suggested they prepare a small meal together. She was hesitant at first, unsure of how to act in someone else's home, but eventually agreed. They worked side by side, chopping vegetables, stirring the pot, and laughing quietly at little mistakes. It was a simple activity, but it was also a form of healing, an opportunity for her to feel useful, capable, and connected again. As they ate, the conversation turned to dreams and future plans. The woman spoke cautiously, unsure if she could hope for a life beyond survival. She had been living day by day, always thinking about the next danger or obstacle. But now, in the warmth and safety of the cabin, she allowed herself to imagine a future life where she could feel safe, learn, and grow. "You have been through so much," the man said gently. "It is okay to hope for better things. It is okay to imagine a life where you are safe and happy." She looked at him, a small spark of hope in her eyes. I want that," she said quietly. "I want to feel safe again. I want to live, not just survive." The man nodded, feeling a sense of purpose. He had not only provided her with shelter for a night or two, he was helping her see that life could be more than fear and struggle. That realization was perhaps more important than anything else. As the evening approached, they sat together by the fireplace, sharing stories from their pasts. She spoke of her family, of traditions and celebrations, and of the values she had been taught. He shared stories of his own life, his quiet existence in the cabin, and the lessons he had learned about patience, kindness, and resilience. Through these conversations, they began to form a bond not just of trust, but of understanding. They realized that despite differences in background and experience, there were universal truths about human life: the need for safety, the desire to be heard, and the importance of compassion. Later, as the night settled over the cabin, the man helped her prepare for sleep once more. He ensured she had blankets, warmth, and comfort. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and trust. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything today. You don't need to thank me," he replied. "You are strong. You survived everything. I only helped you rest and recover. The rest, the courage, the hope, that is all yours." She smiled faintly and leaned back, feeling a quiet sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, she felt that she could breathe without fear. The world was still uncertain, but in this cabin, with this man, she felt a sense of safety and trust that she had not known before. Outside, the forest whispered in the night wind, and inside, there was warmth, light, and the beginning of healing. The man understood that the journey ahead would be long and that challenges would continue to come. But he also knew that this night had made a difference. It had restored hope, built trust, and reminded them both that even in the darkest times, human connection could shine brightly. And so, as the fire crackled and the stars appeared in the sky, they sat together quietly. Words were not always necessary. The simple presence of another human being offering understanding, patience, and compassion could be enough. The woman had found a safe place for the night. But she had also found something Mara, reminder that kindness existed, that people cared, and that even after hardship, there was the possibility of a better tomorrow. The night outside had grown colder. Out, with the wind rustling through the tall trees and carrying the distant sound of owls calling to one another. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled warmly, casting soft shadows on the wooden walls. The woman, now more relaxed and composed than when she had first arrived, sat quietly near the fire, wrapped in layers of blankets. The man moved around calmly, tending to the fire and preparing some tea to help her feel more comfortable. There was a sense of peaceful rhythm in their actions, quiet understanding that this night was for healing, reflection, and trust. For a while, neither of them spoke. The woman stared into the flames, her mind wandering over the events that had brought her to this place. She thought of the dangers she had faced, the long days of wandering, and the nights spent without warmth or safety. She also thought of the man in front of her, who had offered her shelter without hesitation, who had listened to her story without judgment, and who had treated her with respect and kindness. It was a stark contrast to the fear and uncertainty she had endured in recent days, and the difference filled her with a deep sense of gratitude. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I don't understand how people can be so kind," she said. I never expected someone to help me like this. I have been so alone for so long." The man smiled gently. "Kindness doesn't have to be complicated," he said. "Sometimes it's just about noticing someone in need and offering what you can. A warm place, a meal, a listening ear. These things can mean more than we realize." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She had spent so much time surviving that she had almost forgotten what it meant to feel cared for, to feel safe, and to feel human. The fire's warmth, the soft lighting, the gentle presence of another person gave her a sense of security she had not known in a long time. As the night deepened, they began to talk more openly about her life before this journey. She shared stories of her family, her community, and the traditions that had shaped her. She spoke of the Apache ceremonies, the stories passed down through generations, and the values that emphasized respect, resilience, and harmony with the land. The man listened with great interest, asking questions when appropriate, and learning more about a culture he had only known in fragments before. Through these conversations, a bond formed between them, a bond based on trust, understanding, and shared humanity. They realized that, despite their different experiences and backgrounds, they shared common values: the desire for safety, the need for connection, and the importance of kindness. For the woman, this bond was particularly powerful, as it reminded her that not all strangers were dangerous, and that trust could be rebuilt even after great hardship at one point. She paused and looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't let me in last night," she said quietly. I might still be out there, lost and scared." The man shook his head gently. "You were strong enough to survive until you found me," he replied. "And now, you have a chance to rest and recover. You've already shown courage, even before arriving here. The rest is just helping you regain what you lost." They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their thoughts. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. The distant hoot of an owl reminded them of the quiet life beyond the cabin walls. Inside, there was warmth, safety, and a feeling of connection that neither had experienced in quite the same way before. The woman's body, once tense and trembling from fear, had begun to relax completely. She stretched slightly, feeling the blankets around her, and let herself enjoy the simple comfort of being indoors, safe from the dangers that had pursued her. She realized that this moment, this night, was not just about shelter. It was about regaining a sense of normalcy, about finding a space where she could breathe freely and feel secure. As the night progressed, the man suggested she try to sleep again, assuring her that he would stay nearby and keep watch. She hesitated, but the trust they had built allowed her to agree. She settled into the chair, wrapped tightly in blankets, and began to drift into sleep. Her breathing slowed and deepened, and a sense of calm filled the room. While she slept, the man reflected on the events of the past 2 days. He thought about the sudden knock on his door, the shock of seeing a frightened woman standing there in a torn piece of cloth, and the quick decision to help without hesitation. He realized that moments like these were unpredictable, but they had the power to change lives, both for the person receiving help and for the one offering it. He felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his actions, simple as they were, had made a real difference. Hours passed, and the fire burned low, casting soft light across the cabin. The man remained alert, listening to the occasional sound outside and ensuring the woman remained safe and comfortable. He thought about how resilience could be built not just through facing hardships alone, but also through experiencing care and support from others. Trust and kindness, he realized, were as vital to survival as food, warmth, and shelter. Eventually, the woman stirred, waking slightly but not fully. She looked around the cabin, her eyes reflecting recognition and appreciation. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice still quiet. I feel safe here. For the first time in a long while, I feel safe." The man nodded. "You are safe. And you deserve to feel this way. You've been through so much, and it's okay to rest now. Tomorrow is another day, and we can figure out the next steps together."
Oh.
She smiled faintly, leaning back into the blankets. The simple presence of someone who cared, who had offered safety and comfort without asking for anything in return, was more powerful than she had expected. It reminded her that the world could be kind, and that trust could be rebuilt, even after fear and pain. They spent the rest of the night quietly, sometimes talking, sometimes simply sitting together. She shared more stories from her childhood, tales of family gatherings, celebrations, and lessons learned from elders. The man shared quiet moments from his own life, his experiences in the forest, and the lessons he had learned from living simply and carefully. Through these exchanges, the woman began to feel a renewed sense of hope. The man's calm presence and willingness to listen allowed her to reflect on her journey, to acknowledge the struggles she had faced, and to see that she could survive and even thrive despite everything. It was a healing process, gentle and slow, but effective. As dawn approached again, the woman finally closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest fully for the first time in days. The man watched over her quietly, feeling a deep sense of connection and understanding. He knew that her journey was far from over, but he also knew that this night, its time spent in safety and comfort, was a turning point. She had found trust again, and with trust came the possibility of rebuilding her life. Outside, the forest began to stir with the early sounds of birds and rustling leaves. Inside, the cabin remained warm and calm, a sanctuary from the dangers and uncertainties of the world. The man reflected on how unpredictable life could be, and how moments of kindness, no matter how small, could have a lasting impact. Helping the woman had been more than providing shelter. It had been about restoring hope, rebuilding trust, and showing that compassion could change lives. As the first light of morning touched the cabin walls, they both understood the significance of the night they had shared. It was not just about survival. It was about human connection, empathy, and the quiet strength found in caring for one another. The woman had gained not only physical safety, but also a renewed sense of hope and confidence. The man had been reminded of the power of kindness and the importance of acting with compassion whenever the opportunity arose. And so, as the night gave way to dawn, they sat together quietly, sharing the simple comfort of presence, understanding, and warmth. The challenges of the world remained, but for now, in this small cabin at the edge of the forest, there was peace, safety, and a profound sense of human connection. Morning light spilled gently through the small cabin windows, filling the room with a soft glow. The forest outside was quiet, alive only with the distant songs of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. The man had already risen, tending to the fire and preparing a small breakfast for the woman. He moved quietly, careful not to disturb her as she slept. Still wrapped in the warm blankets that had given her comfort throughout the night, when she finally woke, her eyes blinked slowly, adjusting to the light. She took a moment to gather herself, noticing the peacefulness of the cabin and the quiet presence of the man who had sheltered her. For the first time in many days, she felt safe enough to take a deep breath, to relax her shoulders, and to allow herself to feel a sense of normalcy. "Good morning," the man said softly, placing a tray with warm porridge, bread, and fresh fruit in front of her. "Did you sleep well?" She smiled faintly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Yes," she replied quietly. "Thank you for everything." He shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank me. You have already been through so much. Today is about planning what comes next and helping you take the next steps." For a long while, they ate in silence, savoring the warmth of food and the comforting presence of each other. The woman reflected on the past nights, on the fear she had carried, on the exhaustion from traveling alone, and on the kindness she had received. Each small gesture, the blanket, the warm meals, the gentle words had been a lifeline, a reminder that human connection could heal even in the darkest times. After breakfast, they began to talk about the future. The woman had spent so long living day by day, focused only on survival, that thinking about tomorrow felt unfamiliar and uncertain. She had no home to return to, no immediate family nearby, and very little support. But now, in the safety of the cabin, and with someone who cared, she could begin to imagine a future that was more than fear and struggle. "I don't know where to go next," she admitted, her voice soft but honest. "I have been so alone for so long. I don't know who I can trust or where I belong." The man nodded, understanding completely. "We will figure that out," he said. "For now, the important thing is that you are safe and that you have a chance to rest and recover. The rest will come gradually, one step at a time." She looked at him, eyes wide with hope. "One step at a time," she repeated softly. I think I can do that." They spent the morning together, talking and planning small steps for her recovery. The man shared ideas for finding safe places to stay, potential people she could contact, and ways to reconnect with her community while remaining safe. The woman listened intently, absorbing each suggestion with quiet determination. For the first time, she felt that she had options that allowed her to move forward rather than simply surviving by mid-morning. She felt strong enough to take a short walk outside. The fresh air, the sunlight, and the gentle sounds of nature seemed to fill her with energy she had not felt in days. She moved carefully, still cautious, but also beginning to feel a renewed sense of confidence. The man walked beside her, offering quiet reassurance and gentle guidance. "The world can feel harsh sometimes," he said softly, "but there are also safe places and kind people. You've seen that now? You just need to remember it as you take the next steps." She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I will remember," she replied. I think I can." When they returned to the cabin, the man suggested they spend some time organizing her belongings and preparing for her journey ahead. Though she had very little, gathering her few possessions and organizing them gave her a sense of control and purpose. The act of preparing for tomorrow, of thinking ahead, was both empowering and comforting. As the day progressed, the woman began to share more of her story, not just the hardships, but also her dreams, her hopes, and her aspirations. She spoke of wanting to reconnect with her heritage, to rebuild relationships that had been lost, and to find a place where she could feel truly safe. The man listened carefully, offering encouragement and understanding. He could see the transformation that had begun in her, from fear and uncertainty to cautious hope and determination. By late afternoon, the woman felt ready to take the next step in her journey. Though leaving the cabin was bittersweet, she had found safety, warmth, and trust. There she knew she could not stay forever. The man had helped her regain strength, but now it was time for her to move forward, to continue rebuilding her life. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steady and sincere, "for giving me shelter, for listening, and for showing me kindness. I'll never forget this." The man smiled. "You don't need to thank me. You have the strength within you. I only helped you see it again. Remember, life will have challenges, but you are capable of facing them. You've already survived so much." She nodded, feeling a sense of pride and hope that had been missing for a long time. She realized that she was stronger than she had believed, and that the kindness she had received had not only offered safety, but it also restored her sense of self-worth as the sun began to set. Painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, the woman prepared to leave. She gathered her few belongings, took a final look around the cabin, and turned to the man. "I will always remember this place and your kindness," she said softly. "You have changed my life." He nodded gently, feeling a quiet satisfaction and warmth in his heart. Take care of yourself, he said. And remember, courage and kindness are stronger than fear. Trust yourself and trust the world, even when it seems uncertain. With a final nod, she stepped outside, feeling the evening air on her skin and the soft light of the sunset guiding her path. The forest around her seemed peaceful and full of possibility. She took a deep breath, feeling hope, courage, and determination fill her chest. For the first time in a long while, she was not only surviving, she was ready to live. The man watched her walk down the path, disappearing into the forest with a sense of calm and satisfaction. He knew that life would continue with its challenges and uncertainties. But he also knew that a small act of kindness could change the course of someone's life forever. By opening his door, offering shelter, and showing empathy, he had given someone the gift of hope, courage, and a chance at a better future. As the last rays of sunlight faded behind the trees, the cabin returned to its quiet, peaceful state. The man reflected on the events of the past days, realizing that life was unpredictable, but moments of compassion and human connection could leave lasting impacts. He had witnessed a transformation from fear and exhaustion to hope and courage, and he knew that this experience would stay with him as much as it would stay with her. He returned to his chair by the fire, letting the warmth settle around him, and thought about the lesson of this encounter, that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, affecting lives in ways that could never be fully measured. The woman had come to his door in desperation, seeking safety for just one night. In offering it, he had given her more than shelter. He had given her the tools to trust, to heal, and to move forward with hope. Outside, the forest settled into quiet night once again. But the world felt a little brighter, a little safer, and a little more full of possibility. Inside the cabin, the man felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the events of the past days had shown the power of human compassion, courage, and understanding. And so, the story concluded not with grand gestures, but with the quiet triumph of human connection. A woman, once lost and frightened, had found safety and trust, and in the process had begun to reclaim her sense of self. A man acting with simple kindness and empathy had made a profound difference in her life. It was a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful actions are the simplest ones, and that compassion and courage offered at the right moment could change everything. The woman disappeared into the horizon, but the memory of her visit and the lessons learned from it would remain with the man forever. And somewhere in the quiet of the world, hope and trust had been restored, one small act of kindness at a time.